So we're here with Perry Goldberg, candidate for 5th District, Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. So thank you for meeting with me today.
Thanks so much.
So how long have you lived in Acton, in this area?
Yeah, I have lived in Acton since 2019.
Okay.
And before that, I was living in Canyon Country. And before that, I was in the San Fernando Valley. So I was living in the San Fernando Valley for a long time.
Okay.
And have gravitated up to this neck of the woods and have never been happier. Love it here.
So I personally I remember you going to the town council in 2019 about the tiny houses presentation with Thrive LA. Is Thrive LA still part of your company? Because I looked at your website and it said something else. So you still have that as well?
Yeah, so Thrive LA, it's a nonprofit project that I started in 2015.
Okay.
And the purpose of the Thrive LA project is to create housing and jobs and community for returning veterans and others in the Antelope Valley. And specifically to create a blueprint for how that can be done.
Right. Which I think is very honorable. I thought it was a great idea when I was there. Just so you know, I was there at that meeting.
Yeah, thanks.
So,
I mean, that was a really, really interesting meeting.
It was.
Because basically, folks heard about the Thrive LA project. I had just taken an office in Acton next to the post office.
Okay.
Because I wanted to get community feedback on this concept.
Yeah.
And, I got a lot of great feedback on it. But then, of course, there are going to be people, a lot of people are risk averse and they don't they're fearful of change. I understand that. People have a lot of concerns about low income housing because they equate someone who's low income with maybe a higher crime risk, things like this. And so, our town is wonderful and really tight knit, and people band together, and they came out. There was an entire Acton Town Council meeting dedicated to, hey, we don't want tiny houses in Acton, right? And people didn't realize that I wasn't talking about putting tiny houses in Acton. I was talking about putting tiny houses in the Antelope Valley. And the heart of the concept is that we can utilize something called employee housing to create new housing opportunities for people. And that matters because with employee housing, unlike traditional housing, you don't need to go to LA County for a building permit. You go to the state of California for a permit.
Okay.
And with employee housing, you're not limited to a traditional house. You can do something alternative like a tiny house on wheels.
Okay.
And
the process is probably quicker?
The process is dramatically quicker. So you're talking about weeks or months, not in LA County, in the unincorporated area, it takes more than 3 years.
Yeah.
And with employee housing, you can actually have more than one house on a piece of land for your employees. And versus a traditional situation, you can only have one house.
Okay.
Okay, so, given that we know we need to create a lot more housing, the question is, well, where can we do that? Where do we have land? And the answer is, there is a place, it's in the Antelope Valley. And how can we do it quickly and how can we do it at scale? And that's this employee housing framework. Now, you're not allowed to do employee housing in Acton and Agua Dulce because it's a very high fire hazard zone here. You're not allowed to do employee housing in a very high fire hazard zone.
Okay. So you're looking at more flatland area.
That's right.
Okay.
In the Antelope Valley.
Okay. Because I saw your website and I saw the thing about the biochar and the employee housing, and so now that you're explaining it, I understand it a little bit better. So I didn't see, or maybe I didn't look long enough or look in the right places. Are there? So what are the steps into doing this then? I guess. Yeah.
It's a great question. So if someone wanted to set up employee housing, the state of California has a very straightforward procedure. You go to Housing and Community Development is the agency, HCD.
Okay.
So California's HCD, they have very simple forms. Takes minutes to fill them out, and then you get permission to operate employee housing. That's sort of like the lingo for it.
Okay.
Now, to get the permission to operate the employee housing, they do inspect what you have there. So it doesn't need to meet the traditional criteria for a traditional house.
Okay.
But they do inspect it to make sure that it's safe and appropriate.
Okay.
So that's the criteria. You know, people have questions about, you know, where exactly in the Antelope Valley are you talking about, and who would own these farms? Like, what kind? Is this going to be the government owns them, or who owns them, right?
Right.
So, in terms of where they could be, currently in the Antelope Valley, we have hundreds of thousands of acres of privately owned land that is sitting dormant, that's zoned for agriculture. And this land is really inexpensive. So on average, it's around $3,000 for an acre.
Okay.
And there's a lot of it for sale. A lot more would be for sale if there were buyers for it. There's also the city of Los Angeles. Strangely, the city of Los Angeles owns 17,000 acres next to the Palmdale Airport. Because there had been a plan to expand the Palmdale Airport
Okay.
and make it a big airport like LAX. LAX, I think, is 3,500 acres, so we certainly don't need 17,000. But the city, you know, we have this one landowner
Right.
has this big chunk of land that's essentially not being used, and so that's another place where we could really scale up housing with jobs. My concept for all of this would be for these farms to be entrepreneurial situations where the owners eventually, after say a year, end up being owned by the people who are living and working there.
Okay.
So that's the concept that the Thrive LA project has developed.
Okay.
In Israel, there's an interesting model that some people know about that's called the kibbutz. And it's a situation where you have people who live and work on the same piece of land.
Okay.
And it's a lot easier to do a small farm if you have multiple people instead of just one person. It's a tall order.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. But pretty much you become sustainable, right? You grow your own food and you all help each other. And you all
Absolutely.
work together.
Yeah.
And so the concept is that you all work the farm and you all help each other, but would some people have other jobs and just live there
Sure.
and help in other ways they can? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So
Okay.
in order to qualify for employee housing, you don't have to be a full-time employee. You
Okay.
can be part-time, and there's not a
Okay.
specific number.
Okay.
So the concept that we have through the Thrive LA project is for folks to work half-time on the farm. And it's going to sound a little maybe controversial at first, but I'll say this, is I believe it will make sense for it to be at minimum wage. So we're at $16.90 an hour now, minimum wage in LA County. Someone working half-time at minimum wage will be able to spend, this will be set up so that they'll spend 30% of their income on housing. And that's all they need to spend. 30% of what they make working half-time at minimum wage will cover their housing.
Okay.
Most Angelenos, the average Angeleno is spending about 60% of what they earn on housing, and that's working full-time, or
Yes.
working more than full-time, like 2 or 3 jobs.
And driving always.
And driving, so they have a big car expense.
Right.
If you live and work on the same property, you don't need to commute. You can have a shared vehicle, 1 shared vehicle, 2 shared vehicles between, say, 6 to 10 people. The cost of living is dramatically lower.
Yes.
People will actually be able to save. People will not be pulling their hair out on the freeway,
It's a show and tell.
Right.
No, you're right, because you spend so much, not just on gas, but wear and tear on your vehicle, the time in your vehicle. I mean, that really is right there. And not to mention the cost of electricity and everything else. It's expensive.
Absolutely.
Super expensive.
Yeah, so, I think we kind of,
Yeah.
it's so hard to make ends meet. And I understand why people are so focused on a living wage and why we saw, yesterday, folks at the Cal State system going on strike. That got resolved quickly, I read this morning.
Yeah.
I reached out to the chancellor of the Cal State system yesterday and said, I'd love to chat because I have ideas for how we can address the situation, which is instead of just this tug of war about what the wages should be, we can also look at really what should matter to people is how much do you actually save? What's your quality of life and how much are you actually saving? Most people are not saving anything. People are going into debt.
Yes.
Right? And so NYU has faculty housing and staff housing.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
we should be doing that in the Cal State system and in every area in the state of California. We should be looking for more live-work situations so that workers are able to live really close to where they're working so that they don't have a commute. They don't have the necessity of a car expense.
And that stress level.
And the stress
Because it
level,
gets
yeah.
to you after a while. I would imagine, I mean.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think 100, that's one thing everyone can agree on, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I'm fortunate I can work from home and I work for the local paper, but if I had to drive, that would be really stressful. And most people do.
Most people are driving.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's not pleasant to be spending a lot of your life in the car. And,
Yeah.
a lot of it is in bumper to bumper, which is really stressful.
And dangerous and, and just, freeways alone. The 14 alone is, a scary little ride down to the valley. So, yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So,
Well, so it's just to wrap that last point up.
Right.
It's just that, I understand that our thinking tends to focus on how much is someone making.
mm-hmm.
But I think that there's so much we can be doing so that instead of, the Cal State system agreeing to increased wages, there already was a pretty large annual increase that was agreed to by contract before the
Right.
strike.
Yeah.
And now there's even more. And, the reality is, it doesn't feel like it, but we do have a limited amount of money for each of our different services, at the moment at least.
Mm-hmm.
And so, let's say you have, just picking an example, you have enough to give 10 people 7 things or 7 people 10 things, right? You have 70 things. If each person gets 10, that's only enough for 7 people. If each person gets 7, that's enough for 10 people. The point being, the more that any one person is getting, there's just not enough money to have other people. So there are trade-offs. There's reality there.
Mm-hmm.
If each teacher's salary were doubled, we wouldn't be able to have as many teachers.
Right.
That's sort of the idea. I think we can and should value our teachers and everyone who's working and helping our economy.
Yeah.
But we also need to think about, can we do that in a way that's not going to hinder our ability to move forward?
Mm-hmm. I saw on your website, I saw a lot of different things, but can you tell our readership again, why you're running at this time for supervisor?
Yeah. I'm not a politician. I have
Okay.
never run for public office before.
Okay.
And I'm running for one reason, which is I believe I can help. Our problems are getting worse year after year. Homelessness being sort of the most obvious example we read about every day.
Yeah.
And there's a homeless count, and so that's a situation where we know.
Yeah, it's
We
sad.
have more than 75,000 homeless people now, which is more than the year before, and is more than the year before that, which was more than the year before that. And literally every year it's getting worse and worse,
Yeah.
despite spending an unprecedented amount of money on the problem. It keeps getting worse. And so I am someone who is a problem solver, and I've looked at the problem of why are we not solving our problems. Okay, sort of at the meta level, right?
Yeah.
And I think there are good reasons, that we're not. There are reasons that are clear to me as to why we're not solving our problems. One of them is we're not electing the right people. Okay, it's not a situation where we know what the solutions are, and that our elected officials have the solutions, and we just don't have enough money, or someone's just dropping the ball and not implementing it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we have the right strategies. I don't think we have the right solutions, and I don't think we have the right people at the Board of Supervisors
Mm-hmm.
who have the skills identify the right strategies and then to move those forward. So I have, as an outsider, been attending board meetings, board of supervisors meetings.
Oh, you have? Okay.
I have, and I've been attending meetings of LASA. I've spoken at many town halls. I've been on the news. I was interviewed by Good Day LA, and I have, and other, outlets and whatnot. I have been trying to share my ideas for what we can do.
Okay.
And what I have determined is that as an outsider, it's just too difficult to turn this ship. Right? I mean, this LA County it's too big, frankly. It's 10 million people. The second, when we have 58 counties in California. The second biggest county is San Diego, and it doesn't have 9 million or 8 million or 5, it has 3 million. Okay, so like most of the counties in California are well under 1 million. We're 10 million. This is gigantic, right? Like we have so many problems because it's like 5 people trying to manage 10 million. It just doesn't make sense, right? So anyway, I think we need new people who have problem-solving skills and who are really focused on trying to solve LA's problems. They're not running for office because they want the power, because it's like the next gig, they got turned out of some other office and they're career politicians. We need people who have new ideas, willing to go on record and say, hey, here's my plan. I know it's going to be criticized. Whatever plan you have is going to be criticized, right? People who have a plan, willing to set concrete goals and say, measure my performance by these very specific goals. We're just not seeing that. I'm literally the only candidate who has a single new idea for how we're going to solve any of LA's problems. And it should be everyone has a plan, right?
Right.
We should be running against each other on plans, not priorities. It's easy to say my priority is homelessness. It's hard to say, here's how we're going to solve that, the homelessness crisis.
Yeah. Vague answers rather than detailed like what you're giving.
Yeah.
How do you intend to you just told me that you've been on media outlets and different things, but how do you intend to get more votes? How are you going to attend school board meetings and introduce yourself, town halls? I know you're doing one in Acton, rural town council meetings. How are you going to get your name more out there?
Sure.
So you can get more votes. I'm just,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I guess I'll say 2 things about that. My primary strategy is to get my ideas out there via social media. So I have begun recording videos. I posted some on my website.
It's a nice website too. It's easy to maneuver, so it's nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm currently, it sounds like I'm a little behind the 8 ball here, but I'm interviewing video editors right now.
Okay.
So I had someone fantastic who I lost. But anyway, I'm in the process of getting my ideas packaged up in a way that is easy, hopefully, for everyone to understand and have them made very available on social media.
Okay.
I think that's really going to be the best way for people to get to know me and why they should vote for me.
Okay.
The current approach for most politicians is get your name out there, right? And the conventional wisdom is people will vote for you if they've heard of you, and particularly if you're their party, right? Most of us are Team Red or Team Blue.
Yeah.
And so all you got to do if you're running for office is say, hey, I'm Team Red, vote for me. Or I'll be more than just about someone's name. We, the voters, need to be choosing people based on their ideas and their plans, right? And not based on just, are they Team Red or Team Blue? So that's my strategy, is to show people, hey, it is asking a little bit more of a voter than just open your mailbox and remember whose name was Team Red or Team Blue.
Right.
This is asking people, spend a few minutes and watch some videos, right? Learn who the candidates are. We really need to do this if we're going to solve our problems. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting the same kind of candidates who don't make any change happen at all.
Right. And I'm presuming that when you go to these town halls and to town council meetings or what have you, that you're getting a pulse of what the community wants. I'm assuming that you are, of course, as a candidate. At least here in Acton, Agua Dulce, and other areas, people are really concerned with the electric car mandate, property rights, the lithium battery storage proposed projects coming into town. And people want law and order. Obviously, we share a sheriff, Are these all things that you're going to be addressing, or maybe you have addressed, and I apologize if I haven't seen it, but
I am addressing each.
Okay.
Thank you. So, we can maybe take them one by one.
Yeah, I know that's a lot. I'm just saying these are just, just different things, but yeah.
Absolutely. So, I'm an Acton resident. I'm
Okay.
someone who lives here. We're sitting here doing this interview in the Acton Library.
Right.
Acton Agua Dulce.
And it's a beautiful library.
And it's gorgeous. It is.
It really is a nice
really,
one.
really nice. So, I'm impacted like the rest of us here, right? So we're taking the BESS project, this battery storage project as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Folks are very concerned about, well, what if something goes wrong? We know that the proponent of the project is saying it's very safe, this and that,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing is foolproof, and we're living in a very high fire hazard zone. And, we know things happen, right? So what if something catastrophic happened and there were a terrible fire at this battery facility that's proposed,
Mm-hmm.
and there were toxic fumes and contamination of our groundwater? This would be an utter disaster, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't live not that far from there. So, of course, I'm very concerned, right?
Yeah.
So we in Acton are being asked to bear the risk of this project, and there are not nearly enough safety measures in place. I think it is possible to put more, I do think it's possible for safety measures to be put in place that would greatly reduce the risk, okay? But there's a lot more that, if this project is going forward, and sadly, so far, it's moving forward, right?
Yeah.
So, I have been, among other things, I've been a lawyer for 30 years, and I've been involved in resolving very complicated disputes for more than 30 years. Mm-hmm. And while there's a dispute, each side has risk. Okay, so, we have a lot of risk that we're going to lose and get essentially nothing that's going to help us. We're going to be stuck with this project and not get anything in return.
Mm-hmm.
While we still have cards to play in terms of our legal rights, what I would like to see is there a way for us to come up with a resolution that makes us happy, or as happy as we can be? Something that is protection against our worst case scenario. The worst case scenario at the moment is the project is approved and we get nothing, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I think we could be saying, all right, well, if this project is going to be approved, the batteries are placed underground or otherwise enclosed. There should be a 2-mile radius of brush clearance so that we greatly reduce the risk of any kind of fire. There should be a sheriff's station on site so that we minimize the risk of any terrorist attack. This would be a target for terrorism, and it reduces the risk of just kids vandalizing the place, right?
Yeah.
And we have, for a long time in our community, wanted a sheriff's station, a sheriff's presence here. So this challenge is an opportunity to finally get this thing that we care about. And, the developer has thrown us a bone of saying they'll pay us $100,000 a year toward our community. Now, that's not nothing, but I think we should be asking for more like $1 million a year for our community, okay? And who's going to bear the risk of any rising insurance levels, right? I think any added insurance for this should be borne by the developer or by the county. And we know that Supervisor Barger has millions of dollars in discretionary funds. She could be throwing that to Acton in exchange for Acton taking this risk. These are just ideas, and I know that the smart people in Acton and Agua Dulce will have more ideas and even better ideas. Mm-hmm. But I would like to see us thinking through what's plan B if we can't get this blocked, or we think that, it's not looking great. Mm-hmm. What can we do that's going to protect us against the worst case scenario? So that's how I look at the best situation. Mm-hmm. I'm strongly opposed to it. But I also think that we, as a practical matter, we need to think through, is there a middle solution where we get a lot especially if we think we're going to get nothing otherwise. And I'll say one more thing on that is, I spoke to the principal of the elementary school with Meadowlark.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Anna Treese.
Dr. She's not Doctor,
Jones.
Miss,
Right.
Miss Jones. Miss Jones, yes, yes.
Who was wonderful, and I really appreciated when I asked her what's important to you. I've talked to a lot of community members.
Okay.
Asking people in Lancaster and Palmdale and Acton, Agua Dulce, what issues matter to you. And she explained to me that there's not a single after-school program, which, there's not money for after-school programs. I would love to see us have $1 million a year coming in from the supervisor's office, and some of that could be going toward after-school programs, right, for education. And we certainly all want to feel safer.
Yeah,
Money could be devoted, more money could be devoted to public safety.
yeah.
We could have cameras in places where we are consistently having a lot of illegal dumping going on, which is a disaster. I just met with Tammy Necessary,
Yeah.
who is doing an incredible job heading up that
Yeah.
effort to keep our towns clean. And she told me, I don't even want to repeat it because it was so horrific of what she found. And
Oh, I know. She deserves a medal, and I've always said Supervisor Barger needs to come out here herself and present her with something, her and her group, for
Yeah.
doing the county's job.
Right.
I've always said that because
Totally.
what they do is incredible. I can't believe the amount of trash that they do, and I just feel like she needs to be acknowledged for that. Which
Yeah.
it would be nice if the county could just fix the problem, obviously, but she should at least get recognized. It's amazing what she does.
It
It really
truly-
is.
It is truly
And the
amazing.
type of stuff that they pick up.
It is.
Yeah.
And if we had a little bit more money,
Yeah.
we could go a step further,
Right.
which is, let's record these areas, get the license plates, and track down the criminals that are not just criminals because they're dumping trash. They're criminals because of what's in that trash, right? These illegal grow houses, these breeders that are killing puppies. I mean, just horrific
I know.
things. I'm sorry I said it.
Yeah.
But it's unbelievable.
No, it is,
what
it
she's
is.
finding in the trash.
It is.
And it shouldn't just be that we're all next door, feeling sad about it. It should be that something actually happens.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Don't talk amongst ourselves. Let's see what we can do. And
Let's
yeah.
put a stop to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
I
it
take
seems
my
like
hat
a
off.
pipe
to
dream,
her.
right? It seems ridiculous, but it's such low-hanging fruit. It's actually really easy to do.
Yeah.
And
It's really sad to think people can just feel they can dump here. It's so sad.
and they feel like that.
You know?
I have a plan that I call lights, camera, action. I believe that when you have a well-lit area and it's being monitored with cameras, right, then
Yeah.
people feel safe to go in those areas, and
Yep.
and it's going to deter crime,
Right.
right? So we need to do things like this that are, like I said, low-hanging fruit. I mean, yes, we should be spending more money on law enforcement. We need, the sheriff's department, they come under a lot of fire. But as between the law enforcement officers and the criminals, I am a million times on the side of law enforcement compared to the criminals, right? That's not to say that law enforcement doesn't go too far sometimes, but I
Yeah.
think our rhetoric has gone way too far the other way, right? We have to remember, our law enforcement people are the ones protecting us, okay? So every place is going to have problems.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's not go overboard in deterring good people from wanting to join law enforcement, and painting with such a broad brush that we villainize all of the good people who are trying to protect us. That's just wrong. So those are my thoughts on the battery storage project, on law enforcement, and I think you had a couple of other topics.
I was just thinking about the electric car. Okay, so I was talking about the electric car mandate and how does that look since we have so many PSPSs. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. It's a complicated issue with the electric car mandates because, one reason why that is on the table is because of climate change. So it's a controversial topic. And, I think I have a nuanced view on climate change. It's neither all red nor all blue.
Here we go.
Here we go. So I believe that the climate concerns are legitimate, okay, because with industrial revolution, we have seen the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere increase. Okay, so that's not controversial. We know that carbon dioxide levels have gone up. The question is, okay, should we be really worried about it? Should we be changing the world based on this? Should we be mandating, a switch over from gasoline to electric cars? And one way that I think about it is whether you're sure we're on a path of destruction, that a 2-degree change is going to kill us all, or you're sure that it won't. Okay. Whether you're sure one way or the other, okay, don't be so sure, because we don't know for sure, right? But we know that it's a risk, and if you have a house, you get fire insurance, homeowners insurance, right? You're not sure your house is going to burn down, but even if you think it's a 1% chance, it's prudent to protect yourself against that. So we have most scientists who are climate scientists are warning us, okay, this is serious, take it seriously. It doesn't sound serious because 2 degrees doesn't sound like a lot, but most scientists are saying, hey, it could really make a difference. It could disrupt our food chain. Like, there are some species that won't be able to adapt to a 2-degree change, and that will have ripple effects and things like this. So I take it seriously. And it makes sense to me that when you change the carbon dioxide levels substantially the way that we have, that's something, it stands to reason in my mind that could make a difference. Now, does that mean that we should have mandates that everyone has to start driving electric cars? Absolutely not. No, I don't think so. I think there are other ways we can address the climate issue. I'm going to say something that's going to sound really crazy. I'm a big fan of fossil fuels, okay? I'm on camera right here, okay? I'm a fan of fossil fuels. I drive an electric car, okay? And I also have a gas-powered car. I have 2 cars. I think, well, I don't know if everyone knows this, but the United States is the biggest producer of oil in the world. We have more oil production than Saudi Arabia, right? Our wealth is, we see how wealthy these oil-producing countries are. And we don't think of ourselves as one of those countries, but we are. We're actually the biggest of all of them.
Yeah.
So we have all this tremendous wealth that's in our fossil fuels. What I do believe is that we should be using our fossil fuels in responsible ways, and I call it responsible, meaning hedging against this risk that just letting the CO2 in the atmosphere could hurt us, that we might regret it. So I think that it makes sense for us to have technologies where we're burning the fossil fuels in a factory situation or in a utility situation to generate electricity, and where we're able to capture the emissions. And it's also not just CO2, but it's pollutants, right, that are shortening our lives. So we have the worst ozone levels in the country here in Los Angeles. And the American Lung Association warns us that living in Los Angeles is shortening our lives by 4 months on average because of our air quality. And the number one reason our air quality is so bad is because of our gasoline cars. Okay, so it's not about climate change that I am hoping to see fewer gasoline cars. It's about, I want you and me and all of us who are listening to this to live longer. I want our air quality, we're going to breathe easier if we stop burning our fossil fuels where we can't capture the emissions. We should burn them, but we should burn them where we can capture the emissions. So this is a nuanced view. I haven't heard anyone else say this view, right?
Right.
Like, who's going to say, I do want us to move away from gasoline cars, but I want to keep burning the fossil fuels, and I'm worried about climate change, right?
Yeah.
But, so it's a nuanced view. It's like, let's not tank our economy over this. Let's be smart about it, but let's think about the smart ways. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, we have no regulations, or it's completely regulated. And I think that the government needs to do a lot less mandating. A lot more educating would be good, and really fair educating and smart educating, not heavy-handed one-sidedness. You know,
Okay.
so that's how I look at the electric vehicle situation.
All right. How would you get the other supervisors to work with you and see your point? For example,
Yeah.
let's just say the BESS project, the battery storage projects. There's an overwhelming amount of people in the community that don't support it for different
Sure.
reasons, like we just talked about.
Yeah.
It's not a by right. I know Jackie Ayer and different people on the town council have brought up the zones and all that, and it's not a by right, yet it seems like even though the people don't want it, they're pushing it through. How would you get the other supervisors to work with you or to see your point, or I mean,
Yeah,
I don't,
that's a
that's a
great
difficult question, because how would you? I mean, really, everybody has their own, it's not their area, it's, you know? so-
Sure. No, it's a great question. I have a two-part answer to that, okay? First is, I would love to see Acton and Agua Dulce be incorporated.
Okay, now I was going to ask you that next, so that's a good, I'm glad you said that. Okay,
So Los
Okay.
Angeles County has 88 incorporated areas. Each one of
Okay.
those is a city. They're called cities when they're incorporated.
right.
So the city of Los Angeles is about 4 million people. That's the biggest of the 88 cities, but we have 87 other, much smaller cities. So being a city has the advantage of you get to control land use in your area.
Okay,
So if Acton and Agua Dulce were incorporated, and what my concept is, rather than each being their own city, because Acton is around 7,500 people, Agua Dulce is around 3,500 people, that's around 11,000 people altogether. I think it would make sense, instead of two separate cities, to be together as one. A name that I have, that I'm partial to, is Hidden Rocks, on my own property, which is very rocky. My favorite thing to do is I dig up the rocks on my property and I turn those into beautiful raised bed gardens. And this area, both areas have lots of rocks.
okay,
And in my mind, it's very symbolic, these hidden rocks. It's like we have such resources that we think of as nothing, but we can actually turn them into something great. Anyway, whatever the towns, if this ends up happening, obviously other people would have ideas on better names than I have, but this
Yeah.
is a placeholder. The city of Hidden Rocks, and I hesitate to call it a city because the point of it
right.
is we would control our land use so that we would stay rural. Because it's extremely risky to rely on the county to protect our rural way of life. And especially as the pressures are mounting on the county to be taking care of the city of LA, okay, like if the city of LA is 4 million and we're 11,000, who's going to win when those interests are pitted against each other, right? It ain't going to be us. So if we want to control our own destiny, I think the way to do that is to incorporate. There's a process for doing that. Every county has what's called a local area formation committee or commission, and it's abbreviated LAFCO. Catherine Barger is on the board of that. The supervisors have a lot of control over these small LAFCOs. The LAFCOs have not approved a new city. There have been attempts, but essentially it's challenging, okay? If I were on the board, this is what I would be pushing for, would be for Acton and Agua Dulce to control their own fate in a real serious way, not just by having community standards and a town council, but by having the legal authority to control what happens here in Acton.
They could gain local control
Yeah.
of their stuff, yeah.
That's right.
Okay,
And, okay, now, until then, what I would do on the board is, first, I have been a lawyer, I've been an advocate for my clients for more than 30 years, and I would use my advocacy skills to persuade the other supervisors. I would hope that with the power of the ideas are compelling enough that people would be persuaded. You only have to persuade 2 of the other people, okay? Because it's a 5-member board and it's done by majority. So I would need to persuade 2 other people. I think I would be able to do that, particularly if we're talking about issues that are specific to District 5, where they don't really have so much at stake as we do. And they're going to come to me and say, hey, Perry, I need your help in District 1. I want you to support me on this thing in District 2, etc. And I will say, well, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to support this particular thing in District 1 if you're not backing me in District 5. Right? And I wouldn't support the District 1 thing if it didn't make sense. And I'm not going to oppose it if it's like plainly, clearly great, right? But there are some things that are ambiguous, okay? And if they want me to, use my discretion in an ambiguous situation, I think it's appropriate for me to ask for them to back me on things that I believe in my heart of hearts are the right thing in District 5.
Okay. How would you make the county accountable for their own code? Here's an example that you may or may not know. There's an area in Acton, in downtown Acton, called Cactus Creek, and it's a mobile home park that's that the EPA has come down and said they need to shut down. But only the county can make them shut down, and it's because of septics leaking into the groundwater and different things. And I spoke with the EPA, and I got, and they, to get their view, and they said, well, we put a court order into the county, but the county has to enforce it, and it's kind of like now it's back in the county's hands. It's still a running, operational place, and it's a concern to people that live around there. But how would you make the county, do? I mean, that's just.
It's a great question, and I have an answer to that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if my answers are a little long, but these are real problems, and so we need real solutions that are nuanced. So part of the problem with the county being so ineffective is, and it just is.
It is. No, it is.
It's completely dysfunctional.
It's
terrible.
Yeah.
Part of it is we're just, every department is kind of underfunded and understaffed, and there's generally a lack of accountability. Okay, so I think it's under my plan where we solve the housing crisis by creating lots of new jobs and housing in the Antelope Valley. The land that is worth $3,000 an acre is going to be worth well over $300,000 an acre after it's been developed. That is going to multiply the property taxes on those properties by 100 times. So we're not talking about increasing our tax base by 5% or 10% or 100%. We're talking about 10,000%, right? 100 times. So we're talking about a massive increase in our property tax base, and it's not new taxation that anyone's going to be against. It's the property owner who's going to be thrilled to have property that's worth 100 times more. And then this is money that stays in the area. The property taxes are money for our local use. So we have been really handcuffing ourselves by not allowing the housing crisis to be solved, by not allowing these parcels to be put to use and value. Every one of our departments is underfunded. We can dramatically increase our tax revenue. So we're always focused on the cost side of the budget, and we assume that the revenue side is fixed. I would focus tremendously on the revenue side, right? Instead of fighting over some small pie, let's grow the pie hugely. And then we'll have the money to actually fix our systems. Okay, so part of it is, every department's underfunded, including our enforcement division at the planning department. Okay. They actually do, of all the different departments, I have found enforcement tends to be the best in terms of they actually do fine people, and they're pretty aggressive actually. Maybe in some situations I've seen overly aggressive. But I hear you that in some situations, things that should be done are not being done. We need to have a real focus on law and order. You know, like if the law is something's, you know, should be done a certain way, it needs to be done that way. It shouldn't be that we're just ignoring a court order or EPA order, anything like that. That can't be the case, because that really erodes the public's confidence in our legal system, in our government. It tears at the fabric of our society. If people throw up their hands and say, no use complaining because the government never does anything, right?
Yeah.
No use reporting this crime. What's the sheriff? They're not going to do anything, right? We can't have that.
Yeah.
We have to have people feeling like the laws matter, the laws are going to be enforced, there's a reason to follow the law, right? Like you're going to get in trouble if you don't follow the law.
Right.
So this is pretty much common sense, but we also need the money to be there to support the enforcement. So like with our Superior Court, the judges have these dockets. Some judges have thousands of cases on their docket. It's too many cases to expect anyone to really dig in and devote the time they need to understand it and make a fair and appropriate decision. You know, we need to have, because we're 10 million people, we can't act like we're 1 million. Like we have to have enough judges for 10 million people, not enough judges for 1 million people. But you know, that's sort of the problem across the board on things like what you identified with that order, you know, going unenforced.
Yeah. And I'd like to know your thoughts on this. I think this is Measure A. I want to say it was Measure A. I could be incorrect on that. But we're seeing very recently that some communities are getting multi-million-dollar swim centers. And we're not getting anything in Acton.
No.
And this measure, I want to say Measure A, a few years ago, the county parks approached the town council and they said, well, you know, how do you get your community buy-in on what does the community want to see? And they had this big workshop, and they invited people in the community and the Friends of the Acton Park, and what do the kids want and what do people want? And so they talked about it, and the kids want a pool and swim center, and nothing ever happened. And then the Measure A went through, and we never saw the funds for that. And it's just, when things like that happen, like, what do you feel? How should that be addressed? I mean, it's it's so sad we don't get anything.
No, you're right.
It's
You're
just,
totally right. I think, you know, part of it is holding our elected officials accountable. And on every issue that I see, the board will say, okay, we're going to study this. And this is the response, we're going to study it. And you know, from our pet shelters, you know, euthanizing 30% of our adoptable pets, my goal is to have zero, and I will get us to zero.
right.
And by 2028, hopefully well sooner than that, but definitely by 2028, be at zero adoptable shelter pets euthanized. But you know, Catherine Barger, she's looking at it, right, as if this is like the first she's heard of this issue with the euthanizing of our pets. She's been supervisor for 8 years. She was Antonovich's chief of staff for 15 years. She knows the pets are being euthanized. Okay, it shouldn't be that 2 months ago, whatever, she's saying, okay, well, we're going to look at it. It's ridiculous. And nothing's going to change until we say we need much better than this. Okay, now that's part of the answer.
Right.
Another part of the answer is, you know what? The county is so dysfunctional, and Catherine Barger is failing us so miserably, but let's not just wait for things to magically turn around. We can actually take our destiny into our own hands. We can establish, for example, a community garden. Okay, that's one of many things that we can do to improve our community. I have a piece of land in Acton that I will gladly, for free, 11.5 acre property, and gladly for free make it available to the community for a community garden. Okay, saying that on video. Yay!
Yay!
Now, I mean, and I'm not the only one. I know a lot of people have, you know, a lot of us have a lot of land. I live on 5 acres. I have this other property that's 11.5 acres. There's a lot of land here.
Yeah.
You know, we don't lack for land, and we don't lack for this incredible spirit of service in our community. People want to serve. You know, there's that, I mean, most humans want to serve.
Yeah.
People are lacking purpose and belonging, and they're lonely. We need to create opportunities for people to be able to feel connected to their neighbors and to feel part of the community and to say, hey, you know, feel good. I did this.
Yeah.
Right? So we can do that. We don't need Catherine Barger's office to do it because they're not doing it. They're not going to do it. But we don't have to wait for that. We can do it ourselves. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts, and
Thanks so much.
And I think this will be good for the community to see your point of view, and
Thank
I
you.
wish you the best of luck.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank